Man, is it week 4 already? Wow. All right. Well, new week, new matchup here, and we're gonna get into that matchup in just a moment for our Halifax Masquerainmen this week. But first, I have decided to move the standings update to this video, or maybe I'll do it in both each week. That actually seems pretty reasonable, but it does feel very silly to leave it for later in the week. So here are the standings going into week 4. The Halifax Masquerainmen currently in a playoff spot, but with 7 out of 12 teams at 2-1 or better, it's just these 2 points of game differential here that have us above the Florida Phalanx. And if you don't know, I don't know if there are any tiebreakers applied to the standings. I'm sure I'll find out if and when it matters to a playoff spot, and the whole league has to figure that out. But right now, I just put teams that are tied in alphabetical order, so we are level with the Liberty Garden Garchomps here. We have the Foraging Furrets in clear first place, the Peaceful Porygons joining them as the only 2 undefeated teams, and then this cluster of 2-1 teams here. A few other teams still very much in the hunt, breathing down our necks. Entirely possible some of them catch up. Of course, we did put some distance between us and these Urbe Chadots last week, but this week, one way or another, there is going to be some distance added between the Halifax Masquerainmen and the Liberty Garden Garchomps, because that is our opponent. And here's the matchup. So the Garchomps have a very interesting sand team. They actually, as I've noted before, drafted a full team of possible sand immunities, with every Pokemon being a rock, ground, or steel type, except Clefable and Duosion, both of which can have Magic Guard. That said, it is a better rounded team than that sounds, although they do have a lot of ground types like Garchomp, Excadrill, Gliscor, and Palisand, with the first 3 all strong physical attackers able to throw off powerful earthquakes, or Gliscor could play more of a supportive role. But yeah, they also have some other pieces, like Tyranitar is a very versatile Pokemon, Lucario is an extremely versatile Pokemon, so is Clefable, able to play a strong support role or bring some Fairy-type offense to the team. And I also want to give this team, this coach, Silver, credit for something that I didn't really pick up on until I was trying to prepare for this matchup, which is that if you want to check the Clefable, most of the time into a pure Fairy type, you want Fire, Poison, or Steel types, right? Those are the types that resist Fairy. They're strong Terra types to check Clefable, but then, oops, all of those are weak to ground, so they're just fodder for Garchomp, Excadrill, Gliscor. Similar thing, by the way, with the Skarmory. I've kind of questioned before what the Skarmory actually does on this team, until I was building for it, and I realized, oh, its 2 weaknesses are Fire and Electric. But if I want to use one of those as a Terra type for coverage, then I have more trouble with the ground types. So that's a pretty cool synergy from Silver here. I'll also note, of course, Tyranitar gives speed boost to Excadrill with the Sand Rush, or power boost with Sand Force if they want. It opens up possible Sand Veil Garchomp hacks. There's a Trick Room component to this team with Duosion and Palisand if they want to bring that. And finally, we saw the same coach put in work with Mudkip in that one set last season. So I definitely am a little bit worried that the Gibble might show up to try to put on a bit of a show for the viewers. And I have not specifically prepared for Gibble, so maybe it will have an opening to do what it wants to do. In any case, yeah, so a few things I have to keep an eye on going into this team. I have to be alert to the possible ground types, the speed control game, the Sand Core, and I didn't even talk about the Empoleon yet. The Empoleon is also very dangerous because this team has a lot of physical attackers, but if you carelessly bring Intimidate to this matchup, then you've given I was going to say Defiant, but no, competitive boost to Empoleon, and it suddenly becomes a very threatening special attacker. So, you know what? We're going to cut this short. A lot to prepare for this week, and we're going to go ahead and get into what I started bringing. And I'm going to admit that I didn't give myself a lot of time to prepare this week, and I feel like I didn't quite think this matchup through as much as I'd ideally like to do, but I have whipped up a team, and it falls back on some things that are already familiar to me this season, and hopefully it's going to be enough to pull through here. But once again, for the second week in a row, it starts with a Pokemon that, when I looked at the matchup, I thought could put in quite a bit of work, and that Pokemon is Salamence. But I haven't gone to the next slide because it's a very different Salamence set this time. My actual first thought when I saw the matchup this week was, wait, Choice Specs Salamence, which I know is what you don't see here, bear with me, puts in a lot of work here. Does Salamence still get Hydro Pump? So I checked, and it does. And with Dragon-type attacks and Hydro Pump, Salamence is a massive threat into most Pokemon on the other side. Hydro Pump able to hit extremely hard into the likes of Tyranitar, Gliscor, Excadrill, as well as neutral damage into Pokemon like Lucario and Clefable. I brought Draco Meteor for the extra power, but given that this is a special attacking Salamence, I don't necessarily want the special attack drops, so I have Dragon Pulse as a safer and more consistent option for certain situations if I want them. This Salamence is EV'd to be faster than, I can't remember what, Adamant Garchomp for sure, and maybe like Excadrill outside of Sand. I don't remember whether I did that one with this specific Pokemon. Maybe we'll find out if I can stall out the opponent's Sand. But yeah, I wanted to have Protect in a few spots on this team, given that I may be having to try to stall out Sand or Trick Room turns, and that's one of the reasons that I haven't gone with choice specs here. The other one just being that locking into Hydro Pump, not necessarily the most consistent thing in a lot of situations. Terra Water is something that you're going to see on a lot of this team. Like I said, Terra types like Poison, Steel, and Fire are not very appealing into a team full of ground type attackers. So the sort of more generic defensive utility of Water, having a lot of neutral type matchups, is something very valuable, I think, going into this matchup. Although I've talked up the Liberty Guard and Garchomps as a versatile team, and they don't have a lot of coverage into Water types. So yeah, having those neutral matchups with Water, plus resisting Empoleon stabs, resisting steel attacks from some other Pokemon, it's just generally a very solid type into their team. And I have not done this, but I could easily have brought Terra Water on every Pokemon this week. There actually was a moment where I considered it, and it is going to show up on quite a few of them here. Otherwise, I'll say it about Salamence, and you can apply it to the rest of the team. Pretty much all my Pokemon are trained for optimal sandstorm damage, so in other words, with limited exceptions where I have a Sandstorm immunity, most Pokemon on my team have a multiple of 16 -1 in their HP stat to keep the Sandstorm damage as low as can be. And that explains the defensive investment on the Salamence here. And finally, like I said, I decided I wanted to have Protect in a few places. I did consider running Tailwind instead, and I might find that I miss having that speed control, as my opponent has a couple of options in Garchomp with a Jolly Nature and Sand Rush boosted Excadrill that can outspeed my whole team, but I decided I didn't have room for Tailwind in the end. Hopefully I won't be punished too hard for that. Also, actual last thing, I am bringing Intimidate this time despite the Empoleon, because it's just so valuable into Pokemon like Garchomp, Excadrill, and Tyranitar. I do have to be somewhat careful around the Empoleon, but I think Intimidate is too important to not bring, even as there's probably going to be Clear Amulet on something, and if the Gliscor could run Hyper Cutter, even then, it's still just so valuable here. Up next, we're answering ground spam with dragon spam. It's double dragon time again with kommo-o. I really thought that I might bring a different kommo-o set this week. I considered Dragon Dance, or I was thinking Iron Defense Body Press at one point, but given that a lot of my opponent's team is not especially bulky, is an odd way to word that. Pokemon like Gliscor and Excadrill are relatively vulnerable to special attacks. I thought even though the Clangor, Soul, Throat Spray kommo-o is getting a little predictable at this point, this was another matchup to bring it. Terra Water, again, like I said, that just kind of feels like the best Terra type generally into my opponent's team. I could easily have brought it on every Pokemon, though I didn't, but it is here once more. This kommo-o is EV'd to outspeed Garchomp after a boost, I think. Yep, so that's another option for speed control that I have, boosting kommo-o up, and then I don't have to worry about Garchomp being faster than my whole team as long as kommo-o is still on the field. I did not find room for Protect in this set. I would like to, but Clanging Scales is just so much damage I don't want to pass up. Aura Sphere hits a lot of my opponent's team very hard, including some of the Pokemon like Excadrill and Skarmory that take Clanging Scales relatively well. And then, given that those two moves don't really leave me any coverage for Clefable, I decided that Flash Cannon, better safe than sorry, better to have that Flash Cannon than to get myself into a situation where I need it and I don't have it. That means no room for Protect on kommo-o. Hopefully it'll be okay, but to give kommo-o a little bit more cover, we do have one of our redirectors this week, and that is Sinistcha. This does not feel like a great Magmortar matchup with all the rock and steel and water coverage on the opposing team. I feel like if I brought Magmortar, I'd be kind of forced to terastallize it, and that's just not very flexible and kind of hard to work into a game plan. But I do have Rage Powder Sinistcha here. Obviously, that is easier for the opponent to cover for with things like Safety Goggles or a Grass Terra, but they can only do so much, right? Only so much of their team can have answers to Sinistcha, and so the Rage Powder will still hopefully enable kommo-o to set up or enable something with the other 3 Pokemon further down the list. Terra Water, sure you're tired of hearing about it now. Leftovers because the Citrus Berry was unavailable. I think you can make a pretty safe assumption about what that means. And then the moves, a lot of physical bulk so that this thing can sit in front of the likes of Garchomp and Excadrill. And now we get to the moves, and honestly, I was kind of feeling some 4 move slot syndrome on Sinistcha in this matchup. I think that it could really use Trick Room to possibly reverse an opponent's Trick Room, or more likely to play around something like a Gliscor Tailwind or a speed boosted Excadrill. I may yet put Trick Room back on this set before the final, before it's finally time to play, in which case I'll give that update when it's time to record that. And the other move that I'd really like to have here is Life Dew, because that's just always nice, but I think that's expendable. We still get recovery with Hospitality, and Rage Powder I think is important for the redirection to give some cover to Protectless kommo-o and a certain something else. And then Matcha Gotcha and Scald are just so strong into my opponent's team. They have a lot of physical attackers. The burn chances on both of those moves are going to get them a lot of trouble. Matcha Gotcha recovery can help Sinistcha stay healthy, especially if it goes into targets like Palisand, or maybe even Tyranitar. But Matcha Gotcha, of course, is not so strong into Skarmory. Only a neutral hit into Excadrill and Garchomp. Scald is neutral into Garchomp too, but not into Excadrill. Anyway, the point is, I thought that the Water-type coverage from Scald, while still carrying that burn chance, would give Sinistcha that little bit of extra sort of threat level in this matchup that makes it that much harder for my opponent to ignore it while focusing on my Dragon types or whatever other attackers I might have. And since it's Terra Water Sinistcha, that Scald might hit pretty hard, especially if I get a Psych Up next to kommo-o. I believe that Spooky and I, between the two of us, still have brought Psych Up Sinistcha to every single week, so it's not really a surprise anymore. But given my opponent's various weaknesses to grass and water coverage, I really think that Sinistcha might be the Pokemon that breaks through in an otherwise tough game if they manage to give kommo-o a hard time, shut some other options down. And so Psych Up feels like, yeah, it just feels like the higher ceiling move. Like it might be the win con in a clutch situation depending on how the games play out. That said, don't be too shocked if we get to the battle part of the video and I tell you that I've dropped Psych Up for Trick Room. That's just not the way that I'm leaning right now. The next Pokemon might be kind of counterintuitive considering how much I've talked up my opponent's ground type threats, but I am bringing Double Dragon into Clefable. I have to be a little bit alert to the Trick Room mode, and in general, with a Double Dragon team like this, I have to watch out for a random Fairy Terra on something. And so I think it is finally time for me to bring Tinkaton off the bench here. Tinkaton is probably a fairly matchup-dependent Pokemon. It's not a Pokemon that I throw out there into something like, like a full lineup of Garchomp, Gliscor, Excadrill, tripling down on physical offense. Instead, like I said, it's here to give me some insurance against the Clefable. And I'm definitely more likely to bring it to a game if I see the Trick Room mode than if I don't. Hence the knockoff to remove an Eviolite and do big damage into Duosion so that I can try to remove that Pokemon with ideally only one Trick Room up. Actually, I could run Taunt on this, now that I think about it. Threatening Taunt into Duosion might be more worthwhile than Protect on this set. I actually do think I'll probably make that change, but you'll find out when we get to the battle here. In any case, because it's facing ground spam, it is Shukaberry Tinkaton. That will give it a little bit more survivability if it does take a Stray, Earthquake, or Earth Power, or Stomping Tantrum at some point. And with Sinistcha's other two abilities not being especially useful into this matchup, as far as I can tell, I thought, why not run Pickpocket? Gives it a chance to steal an item from something once the Shukaberry is consumed. That might make the opponent's stage just a little bit harder. I have also gone Terra Grass, partly just to vary my Terra types and not run water on everything, but also turning the ground weakness into a resistance might help Tinkaton stick around yet even a little bit longer than the opponent anticipates after the Shukaberry is consumed. Fake Out gives Tinkaton another role besides checking very specific threats, opening holes potentially for kommo-o, or I don't know, maybe something else to set up. Gigaton Hammer is of course here to snipe Clefable, Tyranitar, and any random Terra Fairy Pokemon. Knockoff very strong into Duosion, also gives Tinkaton a little bit of coverage. And as I'm talking here, I do think I'm probably going to change Protect to Taunt, but stay tuned for that, I guess. And I mean, the foreshadowing has been laid on pretty heavily. You know this is coming. It's Azumarill. It's Belly Drum Azumarill again. So Azumarill, I think, is a pretty obvious bring into this matchup. But that doesn't make it not valuable. My opponent has a lot of water weaknesses with Tyranitar, Excadrill, various other ground types. I'm a broken record talking about them at this point. I did think that a different Azumarill set might be worthwhile. Like, I would kind of like to bring a Choice Band or Assault Vest Azumarill at some point. But I decided to go for Belly Drum for reasons that will only be fully explained when you see the next Pokemon. But hey, Azumarill, it is of course Azumarill's most threatening set if it gets set up, with redirection support from Sinistcha, or even Fake Out support from Tinkaton, or even just kommo-o keeping the opponent's attention occupied with Clangorous Soul. There are a lot of potential openings for Azumarill to set up a Belly Drum and go crazy with Terra Water. Again, really solid Terra type in this matchup, but of course it also boosts the damage on that +6 Aqua Jet. Or even if I don't get the setup, Aqua Jet is still very strong into my opponent's team and helps to overcome a little bit of their possible speed control that, you know, given that I'm not really bringing much speed control to this game and my opponent has some possible speed control options that can threaten me, having that strong priority in Aqua Jet that hits so much of their team so hard I think is very valuable here. But this time I've decided not to worry so much about Psychic Terrain, so I am bringing Protect on Azumarill instead of the Ice Spinner. Otherwise, this set is pretty straightforward, and the other reason that I brought Belly Drum is, finally, the choice that I've made for the last Pokemon. I'm bringing something else off the bench. I did consider Yanma for a bit in this matchup, because I thought Hypnosis and Tailwind might be useful into this opposing team, but I never really saw the vision for the rest of the set, especially with Tyranitar being their strongest Pokemon, and with threats like Skarmory on the board as well. So instead, coming off the bench for what I think is the first time this season, unless I'm forgetting something, I am bringing Passimian. Passimian doubles down on the fighting types into, again, Tyranitar, Lucario, Excadrill. You know these names already. Actually, also an offensive threat to Empoleon, which I have very limited offensive coverage into either, to be honest. I do think the Empoleon is probably going to be an issue regardless, but Passimian should make it a little bit more manageable. And I am running the ability Receiver, which copies the ability of a defeated ally. So this is one of the reasons that I decided on Belly Drum Azumarill in the end. As soon as I set up Belly Drum Azumarill, 1, it cuts its own HP, so it becomes easier to knock out, and 2, it's a massive offensive threat, so it becomes a higher priority for the opponent to knock out. If I get Passimian in next to Belly Drum Azumarill, then even if they KO Azumarill, they then have to deal with huge power Passimian, because Receiver copies Azumarill's huge power, and Passimian hopefully is in a position to just sweep. And to make it a little bit easier for it to sweep, I've given it the Grass Terra type with Trailblaze so that it can boost up to +1 speed. Once again, I don't remember exactly what I EV'd for speed-wise. I think it's Excadrill outside of Sand, because there's just no way I can keep up with Excadrill in Sand with +1 speed boost. That's why that particular figure is coming up a lot. But yeah, if Passimian gets 1 Trailblaze, it's a massive offensive threat to the opponent's team, and if it also gets huge power because they were forced to KO Azumarill, then Passimian is just knocking things out left and right, I think. Or if they try to prevent that, then maybe they give Azumarill some more openings to operate. Close combat, maximum power, fighting type stab, just goes crazy into their team. Iron Head covers Pokemon like Clefable. Trailblaze, again, hits things hard, but perhaps more importantly gives Passimian that speed boost. I don't have great coverage into Gliscor. That is one threat to the set, but can't cover everything with one Pokemon, and Passimian, again, can go crazy into most of their team. Protect is here to make it a little bit easier to position if I am trying to pull the Receiver play off with Azumarill. And finally, I didn't feel very strongly about Passimian's item. I was thinking about like an Expert Belt or something, so I decided why not go with Safety Goggles, make Passimian's job a little bit easier by ensuring that it won't take any damage from the Sandstorm. Of course, the Life Orb is already on Salamence. The other damage boosting options that aren't going to Choice Lock it, which I can't have with the Trailblaze set, are pretty underwhelming. So yeah, safety goggles will prevent that little bit of chip damage and just make it a little bit easier for Passimian to survive long enough to pull off his job. And so that's the team. Reviewing quickly, I probably, like, the most basic game plan here is probably something like Kommo-o, Sinistcha, the duo that we took all the way back in the first 2 rounds of the draft. Have the redirection cover, set up a Clangorous Soul, maybe set up a Psych Up, because I think Sinistcha really could be an offensive threat with boosted Machagacha and Scald. But then Salamence is there as a fast offensive threat in the back as well. I hopefully have the tools to stall out a Sandstorm or a Trick Room if I need to, and I can go crazy with moves like Clanging Scales, Aura Sphere, Hydro Pump, Draco Meteor. But again, I also have matchup pieces. Tinkaton here to help me deal with Clefable and a Trick Room mode. Passimian here to help me deal with Empoleon and to give an alternative sweeping option if I think the Kommo-o is not going to work out. And then Azumarill with the Belly Drum. Just able to punch so many holes in the opponent's team if it gets any space to operate. And if they're forced to deal with that, then maybe they set Passimian up for me. So, like I said, there might be some changes. I still feel like there's more thinking to do here. There might be some changes by the time we get to the battles, but the only thing I can do is let you know then, which for you will be right now. Okay, so it turns out that Tinkaton doesn't get Taunt, which honestly is really weird to me. I could swear that it did. I thought that was something I knew, but okay, Protect it is, I guess. I still have ways to try to stall out Trick Room. Protect can help with that, and maybe with Knockoff and something else doubling into Duosion, I can still deny the Trick Room anyway in some situations. Also, I realized while I was looking at the builder again that Tinkaton and Passimian were speed tying, so I have taken the 8 EVs combined from Passimian's defenses and put them into speed instead, just so that I don't have a tie between Tinkaton and Passimian anymore. Those are the updates for now. Back to the battles. Okay, here we are. A little bit later than I anticipated. Any team changes that I talked about, though, I did not end up making. So hopefully that'll be okay. No Excadrill, but yeah, I'm not too surprised by the Pokemon that we see here. Tyranitar, Garchomp, Gliscor. And then they did definitely bring the Trick Room mode with Palossand and Duosion. And then there's a Clefable. So how do I want to approach this? Kommo-o is pretty strong here, I think. Do have to be a little bit alert to the Clefable. Salamence is okay. I almost wish I had ice coverage somewhere. Although, of course, Salamence doesn't get ice coverage, and I don't think Kommo-o does either, without like an Ice Terra Blast, and I think Water is probably the better Terra type for this matchup on most of my team. I could lead Kommo-o, just try to set up right away with like Sinistcha or even Tinkaton. Have that fake out pressure. I think I like Tinkaton lead because it helps me with, well, on paper it's supposed to help me with the Trick Room stuff. I could do Kommo-o Tinkaton lead. And then Salamence, and I could do Sinistcha in the back. I think that's worth a try for game 1. Keep Azumarill and Passimian for a later mix-up if I want. Aqua Jet Azumarill could be strong into the Trick Room as well. It could be Unaware Clefable, of course. Yep, it does get that ability. So if I want an Azumarill mode, then once again, maybe I consider Tinkaton, despite the 3 ground types. I mean, Gigaton Hammer is very strong into Clefable and Tyranitar. And yeah, if it can open holes for Kommo-o in this game, or Salamence, or for Azumarill in a later game, or Passimian, that's all pretty worthwhile. I mean, that's why we drafted Tinkaton, right? To play a role like that. But yeah, we'll keep it straightforward in game 1. And definitely be willing to use the Terra on Kommo-o if I see... Well, I mean, before Terra, Kommo-o has issues with potentially Garchomp, Gliscor, Clefable, even Duosion. So yeah, almost certainly I'm terrestrializing Kommo-o in game 1, and it might be relatively early on. I did remember to run Overcoat, right? For the sand immunity? Yeah. Okay, good. Alright, here we go. Tyranitar and Palisand. I don't think Palisand is able to set its own Trick Room, is it? Does it get Will-O-Wisp? I should have looked more into what Palisand could do. One thing that I definitely cannot do is fake it out, so I think it might be worthwhile to just fake out Tyranitar or even just Gigaton Hammer into the Tyranitar slot. And click Clangorous Soul. I think Clangorous Soul for sure. I don't have to Terastallize just yet, probably. I think it's a little bit better to fake out Tyranitar, see if it Terastallizes into anything dangerous. It actually just switches out to Duosion. Okay. Get the Clangorous Soul. They go Earth Power into Tinkaton. The Shuka Berry takes care of that, but I do take a special defense drop. But in this position, I think I could just double into Duosion, right? I think I could just click Clanging Scales and knock off or Gigaton Hammer. Hang on, knock off 130, Gigaton Hammer 160 before stab. So Gigaton Hammer is just going to be stronger here, given that I'm looking for a KO. Let's try that. The only reason not to use Gigaton Hammer actually is to preserve it for a potential Tyranitar next turn or something. Although, I think unless I one-shot the Palisand, I'd probably just lose Tinkaton here. So I think Gigaton Hammer is still okay. And maybe I catch something on the switch. Yeah, don't quite one-shot the Palisand. Gigaton Hammer will take out Duosion. Kommo-o getting chipped down already. I can think about switching Sinistcha in, though. There's the Clefable. So probably... And I've used my Gigaton Hammer. But probably I want to pivot Tinkaton out here anyway. And yeah, I'd say go straight for the Terra Water on Kommo-o. Probably click Clanging Scales to avoid a Follow Me issue. It'll KO Palisand if they let it, or chip Tyranitar. So we'll just Terra Water, Clanging Scales, switch to Sinistcha, get some healing on Kommo-o. I did not make room for Life Dew on the Sinistcha this time, did I? But I think that'll be okay. I still have Salamence in the back. And yeah, if I remove the Palisand here, then Tinkaton actually kind of cleans up, barring a surprise Terra type from the Tyranitar or something like that. Flamethrower, Clefable. They have ways, but Tinkaton is actually very well positioned into their last two Pokemon if they let me remove Palisand. And even if they don't, I mean, Palisand is slow and not going to take a knockoff at this point. So preserving Tinkaton is, I think, very strong here. Okay, we get Sinistcha in. There's the Terra Water, there's the Clanging Scales. It does get the KO into Palisand. We still don't take that Moonblast super well, but Kommo-o will get one more attack off before this is over. It's probably going to be Clanging Scales again to cover for a Follow Me, and just at least chip the Tyranitar. I kind of want to go for a Psych Up, but Sinistcha is going to be slower than Tyranitar at least, possibly Clefable too. I don't think they'll let me have the Psych Up, given, again, that I don't have Protect on Kommo-o. Preserving Salamence in the back means I can come in, get an Intimidate, I can get Tinkaton back in. I don't think I need the Psych Up. I think I can just, like... Yeah, I think I can just get... I could Rage Powder. I could Flash Cannon Clefable. Okay, I have a few options here. Let me think about this. Flash Cannon, Clefable, or just Clanging Scales. I kind of still like just Clanging Scales and Matcha Gotcha here. I think that's okay. I'm just going to do it and hope that it works out. Alright, good damage to Tyranitar. Matcha Gotcha will miss Tyranitar. That's unfortunate. I feel like that might have KO'd. Okay, I do lose Oh, and Sinistra turned out to be faster than their Pokemon too, so that's good to know for later, but yeah, I could have gotten that Psych up. That's okay. I'll go Salamence here. Get the Intimidate into Tyranitar. Now they've Terrestrialized Tyranitar, they can't Terrestrialize Clefable, so I should be able to beat it with Tinkaton, so I'll just go for a Draco Meteor into Tyranitar. And another Machagacha. Yep, that KOs Tyranitar. And a little bit of chip there. They'll knock out Salamence with the Moonblast, but now I get Tinkaton back in, and I can click Gigaton Hammer. Maybe they protect around it, but hey, we'll see. There's Rage Powder to be safe. But yeah, the Gigaton Hammer finishes it off, so we take game 1. Now what do I want to do in game 2? I think I'll probably see the Garchomp or the Gliscor, if not both, in game 2. I think that's a pretty straightforward adjustment for them. I could try an Azumarill game plan this time. I could try Azumarill Sinistra lead, have the Rage Powder cover for Belly Drum, try to get going with Aqua Jet, and then I could bring Passimian and like Salamence maybe. Or honestly, maybe Tinkaton again, because that does help me cover the Clefable. Sinistra, Azumarill. I don't have to bring Passimian. It would be cool to see it put in work, but honestly, it's not that great into Clefable, Gliscor, Palisand. I could do Sinistra, Azumarill, Tinkaton, Salamence. I think that's pretty reasonable. And then if I lose this game, maybe I go back to kommo-o in game 3. Yeah, I was a little bit skeptical of the Tinkaton bring to this set, but it definitely showed its worth in game 1 there. Okay, this could be unaware Clefable, so that might just kind of boom me, but well, we're gonna try. Rage Powder, Belly Drum. Or maybe I should be patient and pivot Tinkaton in, but nah, we'll see how this goes. Okay, we see Flamethrower on the Clefable. That's kind of what I was covering for with that last turn Rage Powder last game. Calm Mind, Duosion, okay. Clefable has shown Moonblast and Flamethrower. Apparently I messed up Azumarill's EVs. I'll look into that later. That should have an even number in HP so that I get the Citrus Berry, but yeah, looks like I goofed somehow on that one. Okay, well, do I let Sinistra go down? Do I switch to Salamence? Do I switch to Tinkaton? I don't think I want to switch to Tinkaton because I don't think I want Tinkaton to come in on a Flamethrower. I think it can put in work against these Pokemon. Honestly, maybe I let Sinistra go down here. I think I can live with that. And let's see what an Aqua Jet does to this Duosion. Oh, it KOs. Nice. Okay, there's a Flamethrower from the Clefable. I'll get Tinkaton in here. I have the Shuka Berry intact. I can threaten a Gigaton Hammer. Clefable can Terrestrialize if it wants. We know it's Terra Ground Tyranitar, so that's pretty safe to Aqua Jet. I'll fake out Clefable this turn. See if it Terrestrializes. They could protect Tyranitar, but if they do, the turn is kind of just a wash, and then the sand finally gives me my Citrus Berry. But also, they haven't really been protecting stuff so far. They just said GG's, so maybe they don't have anything to cover this. But, you know, I'm not going to trust that until the result is final, so let's see. Not that I think someone would do a fake GG in this league, but you never know. Maybe my opponent is misreading the game state. Anyway, we do get the Citrus Berry there. The Garchomp comes in. I think I can just Aqua Jet that and Gigaton Hammer Clefable. So, in fact, I'll even Terra Water just to be sure. So, yeah, that'll do it, I think, as Azumarill one-shots Garchomp, and Tinkaton will finish off Clefable here. GG's to Liberty Garden Garchomps. Even though I expected the Pokemon that they brought, well, okay, we did see the Garchomp in Game 2, and I did have the Azumarill ready to cover the ground types pretty smoothly, so no, I can see what they were cooking in both games. I think this was just a tough matchup for them. I mean, Azumarill is just so threatening into their team. I didn't even bring it Game 1, but they still had to try to cover for it. And then, yeah, the Intimidate Salamence, which never even showed the Hydro Pump. The Terra Water Kommo-o. The Tinkaton actually putting in a ton of work, patching up the Clefable weakness, especially that some of my other Pokemon had. So the Clefable tried to do its part, but it was just never safe once I got Tinkaton on the board. Yeah, I think this was a pretty favorable matchup for me. So, solid effort by my opponent for sure. Let me see what I did with this Azumarill's EVs. Yeah, I just fully messed that up. Okay, well, I'll have to do better with that in future weeks. But the Halifax Masquerainmen now improved to 3-1. That'll keep us solidly in a playoff spot for the time being. And we're at the halfway point of the regular season now, so 4 more weeks to play, and hopefully those also go well and we make playoffs. So see you over those next 4 weeks.